Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. My guest on this episode of Writers at Work is Brad Meltzer, whose latest book is The JFK Conspiracy, The Secret Plot to Kill Kennedy and Why It Failed, written with Josh Mensch. It follows their three similar fact-based thrillers about plots to kill George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and FDR, Stalin, and Churchill. Since the publication of his first novel, The 10th Justice, in 1997, Brad's work has been a ubiquitous presence in libraries, bookstores, and on bestseller lists. In addition to his notable novels and nonfiction work, he is an award-winning, much-admired comic book writer, TV writer and host, and public speaker. A tireless researcher who earned his JD degree at Columbia Law School, Brad enjoyed the insights and assistance of former Presidents Clinton and W. Bush, and has worked with members of the U.S. intelligence community. And let's not overlook his utterly charming and informative Ordinary People Change the World series for young readers with illustrator Chris Eliopoulos. A decade after the initial I Am Abraham Lincoln, I Am Amelia Earhart, I Am Rosa Parks, and I Am Albert Einstein were published, 2024 saw the arrival of I Am Ruth Bader Ginsburg and I Am Stephen Hawking. This year will bring I Am Sally Ride and We Are the Beatles. Because he is such a part of the cultural landscape, it can appear that Brad Meltzer arrived fully formed with success and inevitability. But as every writer can attest, it is never the case, and it was not with Brad. As his bio indicates, he has long put in the work necessary to have a forum to say what he wants to say. And with that, let me say, Brad Meltzer, welcome to Writers at Work.
Thank you for having me.
I want to explore how you manage your writing schedule. You have, I believe, 3 books coming out soon: The JFK Conspiracy, I Am Sally Ride, and Make Magic, that's based on your commencement address to your son's college graduating class. Then comes We Are the Beatles, and do I have this right, a new thriller. So how do you allocate your time?
I was going to ask you that question. That's what I need to know. I mean, listen, I've been doing this 27 years. I used to write one thriller every 2 years, and that was my pace. And I couldn't write a book a year. God bless the people who can. If I wrote them, they would be garbage. I just can't. They would be turned out garbage. Or people who do them really well, and God bless them that they do them. I can't. But now this year, we're going to put out 3 books in 3 months, starting with nonfiction, adults, then doing a kid's book, then doing a inspirational book, and then doing the thriller, as you said, and another kid's book in there. I need a nap, my friend.
Do you shift easily among projects?
If I say yes, then the next tomorrow when I go to write the new one, I'm going to screw it all up. But you know what? The honest truth, Jim, is I don't see a difference in the projects. And maybe that just shows you the lack of depth by me, but I believe a good story is a good story. And sometimes that story is for adults, and sometimes it's for kids, and sometimes it's a nonfiction book, and sometimes it should go in a thriller. And I know obviously for a kid's book, you can't use metaphors, but I'm not a big vocabulary guy where I'm out to impress everyone with, 50 syllable words. I just think you tell the story, and yeah, I'll tone it down for the kids' books a little bit. But the truth is, I have a line. It says, leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. My friend Simon Sinek's lesson to me. And I've used that line in one of my thrillers. I used it in the book, The First Conspiracy, about the secret plot to kill George Washington, a nonfiction adult book. And I used it in I Am George Washington, which is a book for little kids to inspire them about George Washington. It's the same line. And I don't care what age you are, it's just a good one. So of course we used it 3 times.
Yeah, no, it is a good one. And so you're of a mind that any kind of writing benefits your ability to write, that your chops profit from however and whenever you use them, right?
That's the only way I learned. I was a history major in college. I loved writing, and we can talk about that. But for me, writing is the process of writing. I can teach you how to ride a bicycle, and I can say, go pedal 3 miles an hour and hold the handlebars and find your sense of balance. And you can write all that down. But until you get on that bicycle and start pedaling, you will never learn how to ride a bike. And that's what writing is to me, is you got to sit in the chair and you got to write. And when if you do a page a day, every day, you will have a book in a year. It's building a sand castle, a grain of sand at a time. You just got to every day put down that one new page. And across the year, you'll ride the bicycle. You're gonna figure it out. So to me, writing is the process.
Yeah. I think I'm probably like a lot of people who experience the Ordinary People Change the World series through their children and the grandchildren.
I love
Uh,
you for that, Jim. Appreciate that.
oh, and what I love about it, Brad, also in the context of your other books, is that you don't pander to those kids. You give them the respect they deserve, and you meet them halfway. You understand that they can understand what you're telling them.
I listen. I love you for saying that. It is our absolute goal. So when I remember the first kind of hard book we did was we did I Am Abraham Lincoln. You know, these books were written to give my kids better heroes to look up to. So we've done I Am Amelia Earhart, I Am Abraham Lincoln, I Am Rosa Parks. And the second book that came out is I Am Abraham Lincoln. And I remember the editor said, like, are you sure we should put slavery in here? And I was like, what are we doing this for if we're not putting that in there? And
Yeah.
we'll figure out the way to talk about it so that's age appropriate, but we're not shying away. And I remember when we did Harriet Tubman, there was a point where, slaves are beaten. Do we show that? Do we talk about that? How do we do it? And I'm like, I'm not shying away from it. And the same thing when we did I Am Anne Frank. We went to the Holocaust Museum in DC and we said, please give us an expert to help us talk to kids so they understand it. So it's not gruesome. But I love the fact that whatever that issue is, whether it's John Lewis and get into good trouble, or Rosa Parks or Dr. King or Jesse Owens, it was very important to me when we just did I Am Jesse Owens for the Olympics. And at the end of the story, I found this detail, which is always most important to me, is after Jesse Owens comes back from winning his gold medals and beating Adolf Hitler himself in those Olympics, there's a big, giant event for him at the Waldorf. And they make him ride in the service elevator because he's black.
Oh, gosh.
And I said, that needs to be the end of the book. That's going to be in the end of the book. And I remember they were like, are you sure you want to put this in there? So I'm like, yes, because we don't want people to think you win the race and racism got beaten. Like, let's show people that there's still a battle we're fighting. And I think that parents and grandparents really appreciate, and that's why they build libraries with our books. They build libraries of real heroes for their kids, their grandkids, their nieces, their nephews. And I appreciate that those grandparents and family members who understand that, kids they're really smart. You don't need to talk down to them.
Yeah. What kind of feedback do you get? Do you hear from kids? Do you hear from their parents?
Oh, we hear. If you saw my desk right now, I'm looking at it right now. The only thing I keep on my desk regularly is I keep my 2 original novels because they're just special to me, and I keep a stack that's got to be, it's at this point it's almost a foot high of letters from kids. It's the only fan mail I keep. Everything else I trash, but I keep the ones from kids. And they're great because they're so honest. They will not lie to you. Like if I'm at a book signing and I'm doing a book event, a little kid comes, I'm like, you have a good time? They go, no, you were boring. Like they'll say, you're bald. Like they'll tell you everything. They'll say they love it. They have no, so it's the only time you're getting the truth because all my family and friends are going to lie to me and tell me I'm the greatest. And kids, what they do when in the beginning, they just were like, they would write great letters. And we get them dressing up as Jackie Robinson, dressing up as Jane Goodall, dressing up as all the heroes we write about. But my favorite now that the series has become so popular, is they write demand letters. They don't write suggestion letters of what heroes we should do next. It's like a letter of demands. It's like, here are the books you should do with a list of 25 heroes. It's like dealing with little terrorists. Like they make demands. But the thing is they're right. If you listen to them, they tell you what they need. I mean, I had kids who were writing me saying, I saw you did George Washington and you did Abraham Lincoln and you did Jane Goodall and you did Rosa Parks, and you did Dr. King. Where's your Hispanic hero? I'm Hispanic. I really like someone who looks like me. And then when we did that, they said, wait a minute, I've seen all that. You did a Hispanic hero, you did a Native American hero, you did an Indian hero. Where's someone who's Asian? And we did I Am Pei. And so we've done Frida Kahlo. We've done, and I love the fact that not every book is the most important book in the world to everyone. But I know that to some kid out there, it's the most important book. I know that to some kids who are disabled, I Am Stephen Hawking is the most important book we're ever going to do. And I love the fact that there are kids out there. Someone just wrote me, one wrote me about a birthday party they were having, a Brad Meltzer birthday party I got a while ago. And then another that wrote me and said their kid's obsessed with Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman, all the nonsense we see in the news today, that there's a kid out there who says, I really associate with Harriet Tubman. I want to be good and learn to help other people like she did. Like, I don't care what anyone says about anything else I do in the world. I can't change adults' minds. But for a decade, I've been arming a little army of do-gooders with lessons of humility and kindness and compassion. And I will take that battle any day.
So I sense that you don't write for readers, you write for individual reader, the individual reader.
The individual I write for, I'm going to tell you, it's me.
Oh,
I write for myself. I am selfish like that. And I know one thing, Jim. This is my one core belief about myself. I'm not that special. And if I think it's cool, I tell my kids all the time, if you think it's cool, it's cool. And I've realized one thing, when I started writing, my fiction books, people were like, "Oh, you take us into the greatest places, the White House and the secret tunnels below the Capitol and all these, the Supreme Court." And I was like, I don't really care if you like it or not. I liked it. And then I realized
right.
so many people liked it too.
Yeah.
And for the kids' books, I was like, I want better heroes for my kids. I'm writing for me to give to my kids. And so I guess in that case, I'm writing for my children. But
No, I get you.
there were so many parents out there who were the exact same as me, and they wanted that for their kids and their grandkids. And so I think the one thing I've been blessed with, I just have that. I do have that thing that I've been lucky enough that wherever I've decided to jump is that kind, wonderful, supportive readership has come and jumped with me.
Great. So you mentioned your kids. I want to mention something that you posted on Blue Sky, which I just thought was wonderful. That was a picture of your daughter looking at the 10th Justice.
Oh, you saw that? Oh, that
Oh, it's
killed me.
great.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
that was the
great.
best.
So it was
Let's
written
talk
before
about it.
she was born, and you wrote, "I've never been more scared, excited, terrified, all of it." So I have to know, what was her reaction to
So
the
yeah, so
book?
this is let me just paint the picture of my daughter first. My daughter's 19 years old in college, and there's no sharper stick in the drawer than, a kid who's in college who thinks they know more than anybody on the planet. Than a kid who like thinks that, they think their music's cooler than ours, they think their art is cooler than ours, they think their movies are better than ours. And she picks up my first book that I wrote when I was 24 years old, just barely older than where she is right now. And that book has been read by, crazy amounts of people, Supreme Court justices, like, I mean, it's bananas. And I'm waiting for her review. And nothing I do, by the way, Jim, does she enjoy. She once said to me when she was little, "Dad, I hate to read." And I was like, "You do know what I do for a living, right? You know what like feeds you every day." But she just, no kid should be impressed by their parents. And so she was never going to be impressed by me. And she picks up my first book to be like, I'll be the judge of this. And I literally would sneak pictures, like the pictures, of her reading, because I was like, oh gosh. And what I can't even believe I'm saying these words to you, but she enjoyed that book
Oh,
so
great.
much. And I said, the thing that's crazy, let me tell you this, is that when she's reading it, it was like I sent a bottle back in time, that from my 24-year-old self to my 19-year-old daughter. She was obviously nowhere in the realm of existing or even thinking that I would ever have a child one day. And she's reading through the book, and about a third through the book, she goes, "I'm in here." I said, "What are you talking about?" And my daughter's name is Lila. And in the book is a character named Lila who appears on one page for one paragraph, just comes in and says hi to the main character and then leaves. And my description of her, I know I can't make this up. It's my daughter. It looks exactly like her. And I'm like, I have no memory of that. I just picked the name because I liked it. And so it really was this book in a bottle that was thrown back through time to my daughter to receive it. I've never had a reading experience like it.
That's remarkable. It really is.
Oh, trust me. Someone said to me, as I read recently, someone said, when you write a book, you have the conch shell. And then when a reader reads the book, they have the conch shell. And I never thought my daughter and I would share the conch shell.
Wow. We alluded to this a few minutes ago, but you take very seriously your responsibility to readers of any age. Yeah, I noticed that historians praise the Ordinary People series for its veracity. Even before the conspiracy series, you demonstrated a high regard for historical fact with the Culper trilogy. And readers seem to trust you, Brad, and that never happens by accident.
I appreciate that. I mean, listen, I take it seriously, but I take it seriously again, not because I'm like, oh, there are people out there judging. The first time I did it, I just was like, I didn't even realize anyone was going to be watching, right? When you write your first book, you don't know that feeling. That's why everyone loves everyone's first book the most, because it's the only time that author can write and with that feeling that they don't know they're going to be judged. They don't know anyone's going to be looking at them. It's like choreographing a dance that no one's going to see. You're totally free. And the moment you realize you're going to be judged, you start being safe. You start getting safer and more careful. And I don't want to say something to offend somebody. And you can't help it. Even if you say I don't care about anyone, you still care. But again, for myself, I just hate when I read something. I remember I was watching some movie in Washington D.C. and the characters in the movie at the time, this was back in the day before there was anything even near there. They took like the subway to Georgetown. There was no subway to Georgia. And I was like, come on, really? You couldn't take 10 minutes and just look at a subway map and figure out where the train shop should come out instead of making a fake one?
Yeah.
And that always galled me. So I just always was like, get it right. It's not hard. Just make the call. And I love that process. Again, it's not for anyone else. It's just, and I'm glad that people now come to trust it, but it's solely because it's my pet peeve when I read it and see it somewhere else.
Yeah, but I get a sense, though, I mean, with the first book, we don't really know what we're doing. So we don't know any tricks. We just are being as honest and forthright as we can. We don't know really how to conceal ourselves. So the fact that your daughter responded that way, there's just something touching about that, I think.
Trust me, I'm waiting for her. She could tell that that book was me just being me. It is
Yeah, yeah,
pure me. I didn't even know. You hit it right on the head. Like, we don't know how to conceal. I remember when I first read reviews of my very first book, they would say this main character is so, obstinate and so full of, and I remember thinking, he is? I didn't even know he was, because I was just writing myself. And that
yeah.
was me at 24, where I was headstrong as could be, because I was 24 and my cortex hadn't closed yet. And so I'm just being a 20-year-old. I started writing that book when I was 23 years old.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like that. And I think she could smell it. She took with her another one of my books back. She wanted to read another now, which was crazy to me. I'm very curious what she thinks of the next ones, where I do start learning how to, I do learn the tricks. I do learn how to conceal. And I will tell you, Jim, it didn't serve me well. In fact,
Really.
I think the first four books I wrote were me being very open, but then I started learning, like, you know what? I don't need to do that. And I just got safer. I just did. And when I turned 50 years old, right as I was approaching my 50th birthday, I just had my midlife crisis was, listen, I'm doing this for a long time. I know I can continue doing it. I hope people will continue to pay me to do it. But how do you actually get better? How do you at 50 years old get better at what you've been doing for at that point almost 20 years? And I took a hard look at all my novels and I made a list of them. And I said, which are the best ones? I wish all of them were the best, but we all know they can't all be the best. So which are the ones that are the actual best and what do they have in common? And I went through the books and they weren't all the first ones. They were, a varied group, but I'm like, this one, this one, this one, this one, these four. What do they have in common? They have the best characters. They have the
Ah,
character where you're showing a side of yourself that you just is you. And that's where I started writing Zig and Nola, the heroes of the series, the Escape Artist, and the series I'm working on now.
mhm.
And when I came out with those characters, it took me an extra year almost to write those characters and figure them out in a way like I knew the others. But they were the most honest versions of me where I was now in my 50s. I was writing about a father because I'm a father, and I was writing about someone who loves their fists in the air and is looking for a fight. Those are both sides of me, very idealistic and also very passionate. And I
Wow.
thought I was writing about these characters. Of course, I'm just writing about different sides of myself, trying to figure out which side is right. And that book did as well as any book I've ever done. And it took me a while to kind of come back and realize that when we conceal ourselves, we do ourselves a huge disservice.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear you say that, Brad, because it, you know, I've written a lot more articles than I've written books, and I know that every once in a while it really does pay to stop and say, what am I doing? Am I churning something out, or am I saying something that has merit? And it's refreshing to hear that somebody as successful as you has done that too.
Well, I just remember that one of the biggest authors on the planet said to me one day, he has a famous character that's just one of the most famous characters out there, and said to me, if I have to write this character again, I want to put a gun in my mouth. And I remember going, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be successful as this author, but I never want to have his life. I
Right.
never want to hate something I love so much. So I was like, you got to get better. So I know it's easy to just kind of churn out, but I don't want to do that. And those books where I felt like it was getting safe or getting easy or getting whatever I saw it as in that middle part of my career, I guess I could have done it and kept people happy. Those books sold, they did well, but I didn't feel like they were the best. And I feel like you should always, whatever it is you're doing, you should always be stopping and saying, am I doing it to the best of my ability, and put your ego aside? I think that's the only way to get better, not as a writer, but as a human being. I mean, and I believe that as the same way with how I treat people. And, we can't all be the best. You gotta, someone always said to me, when you get in a fight, it takes two people to fight. So whenever you're mad, just know you're doing something. You may not know what you're doing to that other person, but you're doing something. And I remember my agent, may she rest in peace, said to me, the great Jill Nerum said to me, when someone's angry, it means they're in pain. And boy, did that open my eyes, because I used to have that chip on my shoulder and walk around. And uh, I think when you do stop and self-examine, not to get all new agey, because I'm just not one of those guys, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I do think that's how you improve, as a human being.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about your love of history, if we may. Uh,
Please.
I watched an episode of your Lost History TV series recently, and by the way, listeners can find them online. Uh, in your introduction, you say, "I spent my life telling stories from history." Was that your plan from the very beginning, that your stories would explore history?
No, you know what the funny part was? No, I was a history major in college. And I just wrote about what I loved. I didn't even, like you said in those first books, I didn't know I knew let me go say it this way. It's the Supreme Court definition of pornography, which is you know it when you see it. That's how the Supreme Court defines pornography. You know it when you see it. So I used to back then be like, what do I want to write about? So the first book, I was like, Supreme Court seems cool. I'm going to write about the Supreme Court. The second book, I was like, I didn't know what the DA's office does. Let me go in there. Third book, I was like, White House. I want to see the secret tunnels below the White House. Let's go there. Fourth book, I was like, financial thriller. They were like, what are you writing finance for? You're just writing legal thrillers. No, but I care about this. These private banks that shift the money of the most wealthy people in the world, take their private jet and come fly to see you. I want to know about that world. And the editors, I think, were like, Meltzer's got a short attention span, but I was just like, I'm just writing about things I found cool. And then when I started finding this story about George Washington's secret spy ring during the Revolutionary War, I said to my friend, and I got a call from Homeland Security one day, and they asked me to come in and brainstorm different ways that terrorists could attack the United States. And my first thought was, if they're calling me, we got bigger problems than anybody thinks. Like, why are they calling a fiction writer? But I went to my buddy and I found out that it traced back to George Washington. George Washington had his own ring of a secret group of regular people, made up of regular people because he thought no one looks twice at an ordinary person. And I said to my buddy in Homeland Security, wouldn't it be cool if you found out that George Washington's spy ring still existed to this very day? And I'll never forget, he said, what makes you think it doesn't?
Uh,
And I was like, that's a good idea for a book. And so I started writing about that. And then when my history flag started flying, I was just writing about the things I thought were cool. It so happens that, again, 20 years later, I can say, wait a minute, I think I like history a lot. And it's just what I kept going to. So when I would get to the White House, I'd write about the White House history. When I got to the Capitol, Capitol history. Like, and sure enough, I was like, of course, dummy, you're just doing what you like to do, but there's a reason you were a history major.
Yeah. There's something that happens for writers, though, when we discover something that we really want to write about. I mean, we get almost an electrical charge. Do you get a rush when you find a piece of information that leads you on a new pursuit?
Oh my gosh, that's my drug. That's my drug. I mean, there is nothing like having that piece of information that no one knows. And I love that moment. And I think, to put even, I don't know if it's making it a finer point or a wider point, but I think that the difference between a good book and a great book is the X factor that's on that page is, does the writer love what they're doing? And if they love what they're doing, I don't care, you will feel it on the page. And if they don't, I don't care how skilled they are. I don't care how many years they've been doing it. If they don't love it, it's coming through. You're going to feel that too. And that's why first books are such, they're bullet trains that leave the station. You read first chapter of someone's first book and it's like, this train is leaving the station at about 1,000 miles an hour. Get on or we're leaving without you. You're like, I got to go. Let's go. And to me, what you're feeling is that thing that they just, the story they have to tell. And that's the drug for me. When you get that story you have to tell, I'm like, I love the first chapter of the new thriller that I'm just finishing a draft of right now. I remember writing that first chapter. It was sitting in my brain for so long and I could not wait to get it out. It's one of my favorites I've done.
Great. Great. I want to get the chronology right here, okay? You began writing the first conspiracy, the plot to kill George Washington, while you were doing the Zig and Nola series?
I did. In fact, no, let me get the chronology right. No, I found the George Washington story. You can actually read it in the Beecher series, in the Culper series.
Okay.
There's a paragraph in there that says George Washington had his own secret spy ring, and I had it in there, and I put it in. It's like a paragraph. It's a throwaway paragraph. And for 2, 3 years, maybe more, maybe 5 years, I kept going back. I couldn't shake the story. I just thought it was, when I found out what it was, I saw it in a footnote that he had this spy ring. I didn't know what it was. And I threw it in one of the thrillers because I thought it was a cool detail and I loved the fact that I could use it. But I just kept going back to the real story. And I was like, I want to know more about this. I want to know more about this little thing. And when I couldn't stop thinking about it, that's when I was like, I got to start doing it. And that's when I started. For a while, it's funny, the first conspiracy, I conceived that book probably 3 years before it came out. And it just took us a long time to convince anyone that I could do nonfiction. They didn't
Wow.
believe it. And my own publisher actually rejected the book. I had to go to a different publisher. The great Bob Miller was the one who said, you know what, I think you can do it, and gave me a shot at it. And Josh Mensch and I, who I worked together on Lost History, he was our showrunner on the show, and I said to him, I'd love to do this. You're the best researcher and writer on this show. I'd love to do it with you. And the only way I could do it is if I had someone who could help me with the research and the writing. And that's how it came about. But it started long before that.
Wow. I want to discuss the way you tell a story in the JFK conspiracy. Um, I'm still trying to get over the fact that somebody doubted you could do this. But anyway,
Oh,
uh,
make no mistake. When I did my kids' books, my publisher rejected those too. They said, no, you write through. I said to them, I know you have a lot of authors here who you got to service their kids' book because they sell a lot of books for you. I don't want to be that guy. Only buy the book if you love the book. And I said, just be honest with me. And they said, okay, we're going to be honest. We don't love the book. And I was like, what do you mean? The book is so good,
yeah,
but I said, fine, I'm going to go find another publisher. And we did. And people took to the book and they were like, they screwed up. And they said
yeah,
later, they came to me and they said, I can't believe we screwed that up. I'm like,
yeah.
listen, it's okay. I don't take it personally.
I got to get my train of thought back here. um, with In reading the JFK conspiracy, the one thing that knocked me out was that you impart a lot of information without sacrificing readability. The story moves so swiftly, and yet it is so rich with detail. Um, does that come from being passionate about history, or does that come from being an adept fiction writer?
I don't know. I think it comes from I think it comes from the thriller writer I am. I do. I mean, and I think it comes from the kind of reader I am, which is an impatient one. I get bored. If you start droning on and on about what happened at the signing of on the conference of such and such date on such and such date, and the weather was so and so, I'm like, yawn, move on, let's go, get to the good part. And Elmore Leonard, the great Elmore Leonard, once said that, and I'm going to paraphrase him, but basically, the art of writing is that you have to take all the parts that people skip over and find boring. You got to take those parts out and just leave the good parts.
Yeah. Well,
And to me, to me, what you see in the JFK conspiracy is it's just me and Josh. We agree on what the good parts are.
I have to say that on page 25, fairly early in the book. You reveal a startling bit of information about a certain well-known public figure objecting to Kennedy running for the presidency. Should I mention who it is, or should I just?
No, let's talk about it. That's what the book's about. So let's just for a moment paint the picture so people aren't lost. I mean, I assume you're talking about Norman Vincent Peale
Yeah,
and the great Billy Graham.
never heard a word of that, Josh. Brad, you and Josh gave me this information. What a gift!
Yeah, I mean, we're researching this book. It's about a secret plot to kill JFK, not the one by Lee Harvey Oswald, but a secret plot, and this is all true, to kill him at the beginning of his presidency. And there's an assassin who packs his car with 7 sticks of dynamite. He follows JFK to Palm Beach, Florida, because he knows that he thinks the security is the worst there, which he's right about. And he knows that every Sunday at 10 a.m., JFK goes to church. So sure enough, right before church, he waits outside JFK's house. JFK's right on time. All he's got to do is hit the gas in his car, push the little plunger on the device he's built, and boom, will go the dynamite. And what saves JFK's life, I won't ruin that part, but is the craziest JFK story you've never heard in your life. It's a wild story and that's the basis for the JFK conspiracy. But the reason we write these books is, I know it's titillating to say we found a secret plot to kill JFK, but we write these books because the 1960 election was the most close election in modern time. Whatever side you were on, you hated the other side and thought they were horrible, awful people. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
And what they were doing was they had marked JFK, Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking, and Billy Graham, who has this incredible legacy, but targeted him for being Catholic. And they were like, we can't let this Catholic man who will not be loyal to us, who will only be loyal to his Pope, he will not be loyal to these United States, we can't let him be president. And they launched a campaign of hatred against him. And worst of all, they hid and didn't even put their fingerprints on it. They didn't want anyone to know until years later. And we found it. And you know who else wasn't working with them but was also doing that was the KKK. The KKK, of course, in the Civil War is targeting the black community. But there's a resurgence of the KKK in the 1920s because they realized that they can get more membership and more dues if they expand their hatred and include such new groups as Jews and immigrants. And that's what they see JFK as. He's an Irish Catholic immigrant, and those people can't be president, and we got to get rid of them. And when you drudge up that much hatred and venom, you can't be surprised when you activate someone. And this disgruntled postal worker gets activated, and I won't ruin the JFK conspiracy, but if you like JFK, and especially if you love Jackie Kennedy, it has been incredibly humbling to be able to tell this story that no one knows about him.
Oh. I want to ask you, I guess it's an odd question. I want to ask you about your image. That is, you're a public figure now. You're seen on TV. You're invited to speak publicly. Your name sells books. Are you comfortable with all that?
I've spent the last 8 seconds still processing that I have an image. I do not spend my time, Jim, thinking about nonsense like that. I don't like, and I teach my kids all the time. You ever hear the story? It's of the mammoth. It's a great. My favorite newsletter is, and I'm gonna find it for you, but it's called. Look it up. It's called The Mammoth, and it says, here's how we see the world. And it's a person in the middle of a circle, and everyone in the circle that's surrounding you is looking at you and pointing. It says, but here's how the world really is. And it's a cartoon of you in the center of the circle, and everyone around the circle has their back to you, and they're all on their phone. And it basically says, nobody gives a crap about you. And that's how I view it, Jim. Nobody cares. I mean, listen, if they pick up a book because they're like, oh, I heard that guy's good, or I saw him on TV, great. But if I tried, maybe in the beginning I thought I could, craft how I was going to be. And if you look at my early interviews, you can see that they're like, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm good. I'm just here to be. I'm giving all these baseball quotes, like taking it one day at a time, just happy to be here. And then somewhere in my early years of doing this, I realized that guy is so boring and he's not me. And I remember, especially when my mom died, I went online and I just said, I'm doing crappy. I lost my mom. I buried my mom, and I was honest and open. And then all these people started sharing what was going wrong with them. And you realize that everyone is walking around with this battle that they're battling every single day. You know nothing about it.
Yeah. The sort of point that I wanted to make is that it doesn't really matter what your image is, Brad. At the end of the day, you're alone somewhere, head down and writing.
That's it, baby. There's no pockets and coffins.
Yeah. Before we go, could you just tell us a little bit about the new thriller. I think you alluded earlier that it's going to be part of the Escape Artist series. Is that?
Yeah, so Zig and Nola are the two main characters. I started with the Escape Artist, and we did the Lightning Rod, and now we're going to do the new book. We haven't announced the title yet, but I'm just finishing the first draft now. I just finished the first draft actually, and printed it out, in fact. And I'm so excited for it because I get to, I always knew I was going to bring these characters back. These are characters that I love, and Zig believes that, if you want to be a good person, you put good in the world, and that's how you make the world a better place. It's a beautiful idea. It's a naive idea, but it's an idea worth fighting for. And Nola believes if you want the world to make sense, you grab it by the throat and you force it to make sense. And that's also an idea worth fighting for. And I've spent the last 10 years of my life, as I said, just trying to figure out which of them is right. And of course, they're both right. You have to be a good person and put good in the world. And when you see injustice, you have to fight harder than you've ever fought before. So it's just me battling, trying to figure out how to make the world a little bit of a better place. But the new thriller's coming next year, and I'm excited for everyone to see Zig and Nola.
Outstanding. So I've been speaking with Brad Meltzer. His latest work with Josh Mensch is The JFK Conspiracy, The Secret Plot to Kill Americans, Why It Failed. Also be on the lookout for I Am Sally Ride and We Are the Beatles. Your children and grandchildren will thank you. Brad, thanks so much for joining me on Writers at Work.
Thank you, Jim. Always good to see you online as well.
Okay, you take care. Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersatworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.